Welcome to the debate here on France 24. I'm Mark Owen. Protests set again of Paris. Medical staff this time calling for a better deal. The complaints of frontline staff during this coronavirus crisis, pandemic, lockdown, pull into sharp focus many of the challenges facing the EU government here in France. The question we're asking is this new team fit for the task? Well, Prime Minister Jean Castex has defended his team selection, in particular his choice of Interior Minister. Let's listen.
Pour revenir à Gérald Darmanin,
oui.
Vraiment, j'assume totalement cette désignation. Il a le droit, comme tout le monde à la présomption innocente, laissez faire.
Donc la plainte pour viol n'est pas un obstacle?
Vous le savez,
oui.
Il y a déjà eu, sur ces mêmes faits, des actes d'instruction qui ont été clairement des actes de rejet. Et d'autre part, parce que M. Darmanin bénéficie complètement de la présomption d'innocence.
This appointment of Gérald Darmanin, very much the controversial point of this new government. So he's now in charge of the Interior Ministry. Demonstrators, women's rights campaigners have been made very angry over the fact that he's still facing, as we heard in that clip, an active investigation over allegations of rape and another allegation of abuse of power and coercive sex regarding social accommodation. He's now in charge then of the system that in many ways is investigating him. The new Justice Minister too is making headlines for all the wrong reasons. Two high-profile cases then in this new team. How many of the whole squad, if you like, are actually the right pick for their particular post? Well, here to discuss this and all the other matters facing the French government, we have four guests with ideas that will hopefully bring some good answers to those questions. First off, and in no order of preference, everyone here very equal. Jim Shields, Professor of French Politics at the University of Warwick in England. Jim, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Mark. Good to be with you.
Christophe Devoogd is a professor at Sciences Po. Christophe, thank you for being with us too.
Hello, nice to be here.
Sophie Janine is a journalist and a feminist. Sophie, thanks for being with us. And Marine Calmet is a lawyer and an environmentalist. Marine, thank you for being with us. Now, before we let our guests loose, let's hear from two voters, women, on how they feel about this new French government lineup.
Le message qui est envoyé à toute femme qui veut passer les portes d'un commissariat pour pouvoir aller dénoncer un viol qu'elle a subi, le message est très clair aujourd'hui. Les accusations de viol, on s'en fout et on peut mettre quelqu'un qui est un violeur présumé à la tête du ministère de l'Intérieur. C'est dégueulasse.
DUPOND-MORETTI, on lui reproche d'être un gros misogyne. En fait, il a des propos antiféministes, très sexistes. Il a attaqué le mouvement MeToo. Il a défendu des violeurs, des hommes accusés du viol, des hommes accusés de la pédocriminalité et des proxénètes.
Let's bring in Jim Shields to start this debate. Jim, you're talking to us from England. I'm trying to imagine, being British myself, whether it would have been possible for someone in Darmanin's position, and you can presume innocence, but nonetheless he's still facing very serious allegations. It wouldn't have been possible for someone like that to be appointed Home Secretary in the UK.
Well, there are certainly problems associated with this appointment. Darmanin he's aged 38 and from a working class family with Algerian roots. So he seems to be a new kind of interior minister. But this is actually a very orthodox appointment. Darmanin is seen by Macron to have done a flawless job as budget minister. He will reassure the police now as interior minister. They felt they didn't have full support in the end from Christophe Castaner. His appointment anchors Macron's presidency a bit more to the right, given that both of his predecessors, Colombe and Castaner, came from the socialist left. But it's certainly the case that Darmanin comes with political risk. If the reopened court cases against him gather traction, he could become yet another embarrassment to an already embarrassment-prone presidency. I'm thinking of Benalla, de Rugy, Delevoye, and others. So he's not a risk-free appointment, but he's one that suits Macron's wider strategic purpose.
Indeed. Jim, thank you very much indeed. Let's bring in Christophe Devoogd on the same issue. Would you, given your look, which is more pan-European, I believe, would you have thought this would have been a good appointment to make?
Well, of course, you're speaking from a British point of view, which is a little more sensitive to these questions than the French in general and the southern countries in general. And maybe this has to do with the religious background. But in this case, I totally agree with Trim. You have to see the general purpose of Macron, and you have then to name people who can fit in. And Darmanin could have been the new prime minister. And I think this question, this problem that he has, this legal problem, is one of the reasons why he did not get the bigger job. So in this way, that is very, very, very useful to get indeed grip on the right wing of the electorate, which Macron desperately needs for 2022. And I would like just to add that when you ask, are these nominations fit for the aim? The question is, what is the aim? And we must be Machiavellian enough, in the right meaning of the word, to say that the purpose is the re-election.
Indeed, Machiavelli's masterpiece work, The Prince, of course. It's difficult to see Darmanin really in that role as the prince of the situation for Macron, I think. Let's bring in Sophie Janine to talk more about Darmanin's appointment. Sophie, as a journalist, as a feminist, I imagine this is something that you're not happy about.
I'm sorry, we'll start by asking you to give a pronunciation to the final T of my name because it really changes things. No worries.
Janine. Janine?
Yes, exactly.
I apologize. Sophie Janine, can you please tell us your views? No problem.
Well, honestly, no surprise if it was possible to be more disappointed that we already were so far. I agree with the two persons who talked before me. I would add as well that there is also the situation that it was easier for Macron to recruit on a wider spectrum at the beginning of just after the election, because he had more support, because the fact that he was spreading the idea that he was very progressist on so many topics, including about women and gender balance, made him popular enough that he could seduce people even outside of his initial party and recruit them. So I feel like we are only talking about the fact that he wants to be re-elected, and that would be the only motivation behind this choice. But I think there is also the fact that he lacks support. He really does. And honestly, going this way is only going to get worse, because there is such a big crisis right now with women and even racial tensions in France and so on. And the fact that he made especially these two choices we're mentioning is just a war declaration. So, yeah.
So clearly, do you think it's viable to have someone facing the kind of allegations that Darmanin is facing? Do you think it's right to have someone like that as Interior Minister?
Absolutely not. It is absolutely not right. We have a lot of testimonies from prominent feminists in France saying that they are contacted by international newspapers that are in awe, completely shocked by this choice. And I just don't understand how we can, in France, in the 21st century, have a prime minister saying on TV, like you just showed, that it's not a problem. It is a problem, and I think we will protest and speak up until there is a change, because it cannot stay that way.
Marine Kelme, same question. Are you happy about Darmanin? Are you angry about Darmanin?
Actually, I think it's a question of this whole government, because as we can see in this situation, Macron is leading also the question as president. He wants to be the star figure of the French politic, and he's choosing personalities that are, in a way, a little bit strong and oddly, because you have Darmanin, who is accused, but in fact, you see that in France, there is this difference of culture that you said just before. it's not a problem. Something like this can happen, and we tolerate some kind of things, which is incredible for other countries. But in France, it can happen. And as you see, the other members who were chosen by this new government, in this new government, are also these guest stars, showing that Macron can have like figures like DUPOND-MORETTI and Barbara Pompili, people that he can still drive to be inside his government. And that's, for me, more or less to show that he's capable of leading figures in his government, in new government, to show his strength and his leadership for France.
Indeed. We need to talk about the other controversial appointment too, but just before we do that, let's go back to Christophe, who I understand has another word to add regarding the issues on the new Interior Minister. Christophe.
Yes, when you see, in fact, the polls, which is quite an important item for the president, you'll see that the government is indeed rather well received as far as its composition is concerned, and a clear majority. So there is a difference between, of course, a minority, with an activist minority who is very displeased, and the rest of the population, which is, of course, for Macron, the important point, because the presidential election, as you know, is universal voting. So that's the main point. And for example, what one of the interviewed said, a presumed racist. Well, that's a problem in the rule of law. You know, you are not a presumed rapist. You are presumed innocent, and you might be, after that, condemned as a rapist. Don't forget that the charges against him have been dropped once already. So it's a little more complex. As for DUPOND-MORETTI, he just protested against the movement Me Too. As far as I know, he's not involved into rape accusations and this kind of thing. So he was only a bit against the Me Too movement in its, let's say, in all its development.
Christophe, let me just explain to the viewers, as we haven't introduced him yet, the new Justice Minister, Eric Dupond-Moretti. He's a high-profile, infamous in many ways, lawyer in this country. He's defended some people who would be considered to be indefensible, and that's raised questions about his ethics and his personal taste. But let's hear from the new Justice Minister speaking for the first time at the National Assembly, where I understand the atmosphere was kind of a surprise for him.
On ne juge pas des hommes sur des a priori, me semble-t-il. Vous me jugerez sur ce que j'ai fait quand je l'aurai fait.
I've heard right-wing commentators defending his performance. Apparently he was heckled by certain members of the National Assembly. Clearly, this man is used to speaking in court, to having the floor, to a little coup de théâtre, as they say, whereas the atmosphere in the National Assembly, another commentator said, is more like that of a playground where people will heckle and bully and try to put you off. So clearly he's got things to learn, but he's asking to be judged on what he does, not on what he's done before. Jim Shields, does that stack up?
Could I briefly, first, Mark, come back on Christophe's point about how the reshuffle has been received? There's something perverse about this whole reshuffle. Previous polling showed strong public support for a change of government and a change of direction, but no change of prime minister. What did we get? The removal of Edouard Philippe and a very similar looking government. So it's no surprise that the first Odoxa poll since the reshuffle shows over 80% of respondents believing there will be no change of direction, though Christophe is right that there's some welcome for new appointments, Bachelot, Dupond-Moretti and Pompili. I think we need to say that Macron has failed already to invest this reshuffle with the sense of renewal and promise he'd hoped for. Coming to Dupond-Moretti, if Macron wanted a justice minister who would not make waves with the legal establishment, Dupond-Moretti has the wrong CV for the job. He has often crossed swords with France's judges, not, I think, with fellow lawyers who may be happy enough to see one of their own appointed. here may be Macron's method at a time when lawyers, including DUPOND-MORETTI, have been up in arms against government policy, specifically pension reforms. It may be a clever move to take one of their big beasts into the tent, a justice minister who knows what it is to be a lawyer and seems to have their interests at heart.
Jim, thank you very much indeed. Let's bring in Marine Calmet and Sophie Janinet for more comments regarding the new Justice Minister. His words regarding Me Too, for instance, he's condemned that movement. His stance appears to be something that I imagine would get you both feeling very angry. Can I ask you, Sophie, first?
Exactly. It is the representation, a very strong symbol of everything we've been fighting for so many years now, everything we said we wanted to get rid of in the political, the power landscape of this country and in general, is the exact figure of someone who, yes, for sure, it comes from, you know, a hardworking background, and he worked his way up and he's very talented in what he does, but it doesn't change the fact that today it's a privileged old white man who cannot stand for someone to face him up and speak up against him, and who cannot accept apparently the idea that women are not toys that you can play with. Because I would like to remind everyone here that when it came to the Dominique Strauss-Kahn's case in the north of France and the little parties that they were having with a lot of sex workers, women, very young for some of them, he was defending this type of event by saying that his friends were allowed to have a little bit of fun or something like this. It's just a total representation of everything we reject completely and we don't want, especially ruling our country. This is an outrage.
Indeed. Can I just add at this point as well that one of the great things about France is that there is this idea of liberty, and the good thing for me as a journalist is that I can stand here and I can criticize the government and I can discuss this and we can discuss how that all fits in, and that's something very much to be said in France's favor. There are certain aspects about French society that make other people question how French people live and what they choose to do. And I think, as you just pointed out, Sophie, it is governed by white, influential men. That's one of the issues. Marine, in terms of what we've got here with Darmanin, with Moretti, with DUPOND-MORETTI, is this taking the government basically off on a direction that it shouldn't be going in? Is this losing the focus as to what the government should be doing?
In my position, you know, the most important question is what will be done for the environmental policies in France? Because as an environmentalist, as an engaged person for NGOs, I'm defending a clear change in the environmental politics. And in fact, the problem I just said is that we have personalities that are controversial, that are limiting the debates to their own person and not the subject they should be representing. So like justice, very important debate on justice, social justice, environmental justice. Here in France at the moment, we have a huge time also including the citizens, because we just closed an historic debate from the Citizens Climate Convention, who was a convention with non-elected citizens who worked on measures to limit climate change and to actually change our economical politics, industrial politics. And we have to have a government that is ready to work and to work hard to transform what the society gave us as indications, clear indications for the direction they want to go. And the problem is the focus on this kind of personalities is a bad focus, the bad one. And we need to focus on the real issues of the last 2 years of this term, of the presidential term.
Indeed, when the politicians become the stars in many ways, the issues get forgotten about. Marine, can I just keep you here and just ask you about the appointment of Barbara Pompili as Minister of Ecological Transition? I mean, clearly something you would welcome, I imagine, but do you feel perhaps there could have been more green shoots popping up in this government, given the performance of the Greens in the municipal elections.
Yeah, I think Macron did here something unbelievable in the way what politics can do, you know, taking an old green politician in his government just after the municipal victory of the Green Party in France. It's a great shot for him. In our position, we have to analyze what and where she's coming from. She says she wants to be a minister of action. She wants to be a minister of results. And she says, yesterday is over. We have to build up this new world, and it's we don't want big words anymore. We want to achieve the Paris Agreement. Do we have to does we have this chance to move forward now? And it's a real important question, because Hulot has thrown the towel. De Rugy, Born has not really frankly succeeded in transforming the society. Will she do better than the precedent ministers? We have huge challenges here in France for environment. I personally work in French Guiana, where the French government is continuing to give new mining permits, new mining authorization, where we just say and point on the politic of Bolsonaro in the Amazon. So we have to do a lot of work on ourselves to align our words with our actions, and I hope that she understands it.
Indeed. Driving in to host this program, the traffic on the Boulevard Périphérique around Paris made me yearn for the days of lockdown when you could just drive through. And clearly Paris enjoyed that period when the skies cleared, when the pollution was less and there were fewer cars driving around on the streets. The question is, though, is all that going to be forgotten? Jim Shields, can I bring you in to talk about this in some ways? The green agenda pushed to one side. This government is actually very much a right-wing government, isn't it?
It is. And Macron appears to be in denial about the elections we've just come through, the municipal elections. And he bases that denial on figures. These elections involved around a third of the electorate, 16.5 million voters, of whom just 4 out of 10 voted. So around 6.5 million voters determined the second round of the municipal elections. That's just about 14% of the total electorate. Macron believes the lessons to be drawn from this, even with the great surge of the Greens in Lyon, Bordeaux, Strasbourg, Marseille, are limited. It's a complex conundrum for him, the sort of president he is and the ground he now occupies, which is clearly on the centre right. That's where he sees his base, and that's where he sees his re-election lying, at least in the first round, to get through to the runoff before he broadens his tent. So it's a complex conundrum how to respond to what demand there clearly is for greener policies. Macron seems to have taken the view that for now, it's safer to play to his centre-right base and then tread a careful path over the next year with a greener agenda, as Marine has said, coming out of the Citizens' Convention.
Indeed, women's rights, then over the shoulder that goes. The green agenda, over the shoulder that goes. There's a right-leaning government to try to secure things and improve the economy. That's the aim. Christophe, there was obviously a move towards the Greens in the local elections. There's the COP21 Accords, the Paris Climate Agreement. Clearly, there is one discourse about green, and the discourse that is happening in reality has a very different colour.
Well, I think we must really look precisely at the numbers, and just Jim mentioned a few interesting figures. Don't forget that the green wave is something very, very, very questionable. It's only a few cities, only 12 cities, in fact, of some importance went to the green against hundreds to the right and to the left. So I've seen other and bigger waves in my life, you see? So, and it was most of the time, you see in Marseille, for example, or in Lyon, not huge victories, especially when you see that very few people voted. So Macron makes this analysis because he knows how to count figures. So what is, when you see the whole left in France, including the Green Party, you come up to maximum 30% of it. So where can you win the elections when you have Marine Le Pen with also some 30% of the votes on the other side? You can only win it in the center, and especially in the center right, which is where the greatest forces are. That's why I don't think, in fact, you have a government that leans to the right, but you have, it's a very Macron government, if you see it well, with people who owes everything to Macron, starting with the prime minister. So it's very much a Macron system in order to win the elections and to have some green, and I totally agree with the two ladies, some green washing, indeed, that can help to win some votes on the center left. But for the rest, the calculation is, I don't know if it's a good one, but the calculation is clear. The left, including the Greens, are a very small proportion of the French electorate that will vote in 2 years.
So a little bit of greenwashing, Christophe, is what you're suggesting. Let's bring in Marine Calmet to talk on that issue, because Marine, I imagine that concept, and I'm thinking of Emmanuel Macron saying, let's make the planet great again. It must seem just like lip service, just words that are fairly meaningless.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, of course, what Christophe just said. It's, for me, it's a historical victory for Green Party, because 5 years ago, as Pompili left our Green Party in France and went to the Social Party, and after that to Macron, the Green Party was on the knees. So what we see today is a clear victory of the ideas of ecology in the big cities in France. So I wouldn't be so shy on the green victory in France. But on the other part, in the government, the representation of Pompili is also, she's a personality that left the Green Party to go to the right, actually, because nobody in the Green Party would accept today to go inside a government that is on the Macron side. So, of course, the very question that we all ask ourselves is, will she have levers to put ecology at the heart of the economic transformation that is announced by the new economical plan? So she says she hopes that ecology will no longer be confined to her ministry, but that she will be giving roadmaps to the other ministers to put ecology in the very heart of the ministries. Personally, I want to see this as a beginning of good answer, but with the whole economical crisis, I have suspicions that economy and industry will be stronger than ecological issues.
Marine, thank you very much indeed. Let's bring Sophie straight in to talk a little bit more about that. Sophie, is the fear that things like the economy need to take precedence, and issues such as the environment, issues such as women's rights just get thrown out of the window?
Completely. I think everybody knows this famous quote from Simone de Beauvoir saying that women's rights are never something that are acquired, that it's something you will always have to fight for, especially in terms in troubled times. But yeah, what we can say, I completely agree with both Marine and Christophe about the fact that this government is very representative of Macron's passion for the model that we have, the Fifth Republic, micromanagement, and so on. So he brought in some controversial and popular figures that I think he can play with a bit. They would probably disagree, but I think that's the case of Barbara Pompili. I think that the reason that she joined his party, La République En Marche, at some point was also because she thought that it could give her a better opportunity to take action. good for her. As Marine said, all we have to do now is believe that she has good intentions, because what I wanted to remind everyone as well is that what matters is who says that they're going to be invested, who says that they're going to do something. So there is a big problem with this government and with Macron in general, with the fact that there is always a wider gap between what he says he's going to do and what he actually does. But at least, we should focus on what the people say that they are doing. They know that we will be watching them. And it's the same thing, I think, for the electorate. So I would completely disagree with Christophe and side with Marine, very surprisingly, about the fact that it doesn't really matter how many people went to the polls, because the people who went to the polls are the ones who are, getting involved in the political life of their country, who are using their fundamental rights to change things. And so this green wave is representative of the state of mind of France currently. And the state of mind of France currently is enough police violence, enough racial discrimination, enough gender inequality problems, more social justice, and more environmental policies.
Sophie, thank you very much indeed. So we, I think, agree to disagree on certain issues there. I mean, clearly the issue of women's rights is extremely important, as is the environment, as is also the economy. Jim, can I bring you in to talk about something that you brought up a little earlier? The case of Edouard Philippe, who was very popular. Is getting rid of Edouard Philippe something that Emmanuel Macron might live to regret? I'm thinking perhaps of a possible emergence of a rival come the presidential vote.
Yes, it's certainly true that Edouard Philippe leaves office much more popular than Emmanuel Macron. And that's an important starting point. Really, the polls show that there's a big gap between them. And indeed, we might look here for one of the reasons why he has left office, why Macron found him, in the end, surplus to requirements. He then went on to win an emphatic victory in Le Havre to retain the mayorship there. So he has a serious political base. He's developed a brand. He's developed a following. He will have the space outside government, Edouard Philippe, to prepare a bid for the presidency in 2022 if he's so inclined. So Macron could have neutralized a potential rival by keeping him in. But the bigger picture for Macron was he needed a new team with fresh political capital to take on the major challenges, and especially the economic challenges that lie ahead in the wake of the pandemic. Time will tell whether that was a good decision or whether it will come back to haunt him.
Indeed, it is fascinating the number of permutations we've managed to uncover in this short amount of time discussing it together. Christophe, can I bring you back in? Same issue. Do you see Edouard Philippe as a possible rival? On the other side of the political spectrum, do you see something developing between the, let's say, Renaissance Socialist Party, hopefully coming back for their good, and the Greens, perhaps, another front, perhaps, that could be effective come the next big vote?
Well, I happen to have written an article before all this new episode, and where I guessed at the time that Edouard Philippe would not stay for, once again, Machiavellian reasons. The practice of the Fifth Republic is that the president is number one and must remain number one. And it is very difficult for a prime minister to be lastingly more popular than the president. And we have seen several changes like that in the past, when de Gaulle dismissed Pompidou, when Pompidou dismissed Chaban-Delmas, and so on. The only exception, in fact, in the Fifth Republic, where the president kept the prime minister who was popular, is Nicolas Sarkozy. And do you remember what happened to Sarkozy at the second round of 2012? So I think Macron thought, I need a second round, I need a second breath, so I need to change the prime minister who cannot lastingly stay above me, overshadowing me. That's one reason. And I think also, and Jean mentioned this very important point that everybody seems to forget, is Edouard Philippe inclined to get the job, or at least in 2 years' time? Is Edouard Philippe really willing to be president? I'm not so sure of that. Maybe later, maybe the idea will come. But for the time being, maybe he wants to be the mayor of Le Havre after 3 very, very difficult years. And one more point about the left. First, I'm precisely, it's very important. I come back on what I think I think it was Marine or Sophie, I think, said about the police, for example. We just have a poll about the popularity of the police in France, and it's overwhelmingly, the French opinion is supporting the police. It's something like 75%. There is, of course, especially in the youth, there is concern about police violence, but the overwhelming majority, we have the poll of yesterday, saying that there is support for the police, which means that the left and the leftist agenda is still a very, very, very limited minority. I mentioned that, and even the Ecology Party seems, in the prospect of the elections, to be around 15%. The presidential election is not good for the Green Party, who has no great candidate. It's not Daniel Cohn-Bendit who's not there, you see. So once again, I think you have militants, you have activism, which is very important, especially among the youth. But this is far from being not even close to the majority. And that's exactly what Macron very coldly is making up.
Christophe, thank you. Let me bring Sophie in to respond to that one. Sophie, the issue of police brutality is something that you spoke about with great passion earlier on, but the police, overwhelmingly, according to Christophe and the latest polls, have the support of the people.
Well, you know, when the pandemic of the COVID-19 arrived in Europe, I was also, and I regret it, but I was also part of the big majority who believed the governments when they said we wouldn't have any issue with this pandemic, like it was going to stop at the French border somehow. So it's okay sometimes to be in the part of the majority, which is not necessarily on the right side of history. It happens.
Marine, your thoughts?
I think the argument about majority and minority is maybe not the best way to deal with this kind of question. We are facing ecological crisis, which is evolving in a way that includes the habitability of our planet and the condition of life of us all. And if you think that today the Green Party and the Green ideas are minority ideas, I think you are missing a point, that it's just including us all. And there is here no question of minority or minority. It's a global justice problem that we are facing. And considering what we see today in our society, of course, ideas take time to emerge, to be understood. But as you can see it from the results of the climate convention, the citizens, when they have the information, when they have time to figure problems out, to give their opinion, to be in responsibility, then they choose in a huge majority the side of protecting the environment and the conditions of viability of our ecosystems. So I think it's just a question of time and not of majority, that we have the emergency being the main question in our country, and I'm very happy about it. Actually, what I can see is that the last government was very close-minded to this question. Edouard Philippe and Nicole Belloubet, the last Minister of Justice, they were completely close to the idea of recognizing ecocide or planetary boundaries, which are the main subjects I'm working on. And what I see is that we have this mad dog, this DUPOND-MORETTI coming. We don't know if he's a nature lover, if he has an opinion on ecological ideas, but let them surprise us. Let's give them a chance to achieve something.
Indeed, and those surprises may be good, may be bad. We've got very little time left. I just want to go around quickly just to sort of put the final question, which I wanted to talk more about, but sadly time against us. Jim Shields, starting with you. Is this a government that can push Macron towards re-election? If you can keep it brief, I'd be grateful.
That's the plan. But when presidents talk of reinventing themselves, I look to history. The image of a president is quickly formed, and after that becomes extremely difficult to change. Chirac was quickly labelled a liar, Sarkozy a blamed show-off, Hollande a president not up to the job. None of them could shape that initial image. Macron labours under an image now of being arrogant. That's his Achilles heel, and no amount of polling suggests he's managing to dispel it.
Jim Shields, thank you. Sophie Janinet, do you think this government will do the job for Macron getting re-elected? What do you think?
I agree with Jim. I would say that in addition to being already known for being maybe bragging too much, I would say that, like I said before, Macron is also known now for making promises and failing to keep them. And this government is just a confirmation that it was his plan all along, and it's just doing what he wants to, ignoring what people really want. So I don't think he's going to get re-elected with that, no.
Sophie, thank you. Christophe, same question. Is this the government that's fit for purpose?
Meaning the purpose being the re-election. That's what you said.
Getting re-elected, yeah.
I think it will all depend on the economic circumstances in the coming months. It is the challenge. I totally agree with Marine on the idea that environment is a very important subject. But I think we have only 18 months, and in this 18 months, you will see that economy and social issues will take over.
Christophe, thank you very much indeed. And Marine, final word to you, if you could be brief. Is this government going to get Macron re-elected, or is it going to go against him?
I think he has great chance to be re-elected because we have no strong figure in the opposition for now. But if he fails on, for example, the climate policy, and if the Green Party chooses their best cards to be part of the next presidential election, then we have chances to be very surprised of what's happening.
Marine Calmet, lawyer and environmentalist, thank you very much indeed. Sophie Janinet, journalist and feminist, thank you. Thanks to Christophe de Voogd, Professor at Sciences Po, and thanks to Jim Shields, Professor of French Politics at Warwick in England. And thanks to you for watching. Stay with us here in France 24. More to come.
Always trust what the correspondent tells you. When Emmanuel Soji calls us on a Friday night to say that 2 Frenchmen have been kidnapped in northern Benin, even if authorities here in Paris aren't talking about it, I know it's true because I know how hard she's worked to verify that information. I too was once a West Africa correspondent, and you wouldn't believe the amount of information, true or false, that people throw your way that you then have to check and double check. A more recent example, there were the news agency wires talking about a massacre in Mali. Our correspondent Christelle Pire calls up, says, wait before you give the toll. I'm still fact checking it. We want to go fast, but you know what? We waited.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.